I don't know what fascinates me. The way a single tree grows stronger when it stands alone. The way its roots dig deeper, its trunk grows thicker, and its branches reach higher, precisely because it faces the wind by itself. That's exactly what I want to share with you today. Let me tell you something profound. Throughout my journey, I've noticed a pattern. The most transformative moments, the deepest realizations, and the most powerful breakthroughs always happened when I was walking my path alone. Picture this. You're standing at a crossroads. Everyone around you is taking the well-worn path to the right. But something deep within you pulls you toward the untraveled path to the left. Your heart knows which way to go, but your mind is filled with doubts. What will others think? Why can't I just follow the crowd? Am I making a mistake by going alone? I am here to tell you that this moment, this exact moment of choosing to walk alone, could be the most powerful decision of your life. Let me explain why. You see, there's a sacred power in solitude that most people never discover. They spend their entire lives by nights constantly seeking validation, forever afraid of being alone. But here's the truth. Your greatest power emerges in solitude. Think about how nature works. A diamond forms under intense pressure, alone in the darkness. A pearl develops in perfect solitude within its shell. A butterfly transforms in the privacy of its cocoon. None of these miraculous transformations happen in a crowd. I remember standing at my own crossroads years ago. Everyone expected me to follow a certain path, to make the sensible choice. But deep within, I knew I had to walk alone. It was terrifying at first, the solitude, the uncertainty, the weight of my own decisions. But something remarkable happened. As I embraced walking alone, my vision became clearer. My inner voice grew stronger. My purpose revealed itself with crystal clarity. Because when you remove the noise of others' opinions, you can finally hear your own truth. There's a profound difference between being lonely and being alone. Loneliness is a feeling of emptiness, but solitude, embraced solitude, is a state of fullness. It's where you discover your own power, your own wisdom, your own path. Let me share something I've never told anyone before. Every major breakthrough in my understanding, every quantum leap in my growth, came during periods of intense solitude. Not when I was seeking advice, not when I was following others, but when I dared to stand alone and listen to my inner wisdom. You might be wondering, but isn't it selfish to walk alone? Here's the paradox. By having the courage to walk alone, you actually become more capable of authentic connection. When you're no longer dependent on others for validation, you can offer genuine presence. When you're not constantly seeking approval, you can give sincere support. Consider this truth. The universe speaks in whispers, and these whispers can only be heard in silence. When you dare to walk alone, you begin to hear these whispers. They guide you, shape you, transform you in ways that collective noise never could. I've observed something fascinating. The most powerful people I've ever met weren't those constantly surrounded by crowds. They were the ones who learned to embrace solitude, who understood that true strength comes from within, not from external validation. Let me share a profound realization with you. Every morning when the sun rises, it doesn't need permission. When a flower blooms, it doesn't ask for approval. When a river flows, it doesn't seek consensus. Nature understands the power of following its own path. You see, there's a magnificent power in choosing to walk alone. It's not about isolation, it's about liberation. Liberation from the need to conform, from the pressure to please, from the exhaustion of living someone else's dream. Think about the times when you felt most alive. Weren't they moments when you followed your own inner guidance? When you trusted your intuition despite what others said? When you dared to stand alone in your truth? I remember a time when I was at my lowest point. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do, where I should go, who I should be. The noise was deafening. But it was only when I stepped away, when I chose to walk alone, that clarity came. Here's what I discovered. Your path is as unique as your fingerprint. No one else can walk it for you. No one else can tell you which way to go. The answers you seek aren't in the crowd. They're in the silence of your own heart. Let me tell you about the power of solitary decision making. When you make choices alone, truly alone, something magical happens. Your inner compass awakens. Your intuition sharpens. Your vision clears. You begin to see possibilities that were hidden before. There's a sacred mathematics to walking alone. Each step you take in solitude multiplies your strength. Each moment you spend listening to your own wisdom compounds your power. Each decision you make from your own truth exponentially increases your authenticity. I've noticed that the universe has a peculiar way of responding to those who dare to walk alone. It's as if it says, finally, here's someone who trusts themselves enough to listen to their own heart. Think about a time when you felt completely lost in a crowd, surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone. That's not the kind of solitude I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of solitude that feels like coming home to yourself. You see, walking alone doesn't mean walking without purpose. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When you embrace your solitary path, your purpose becomes clearer than ever before. It's like wiping fog from a mirror. Suddenly you can see yourself with perfect clarity. Let me share something profound with you about transformation. Real transformation, the kind that changes you at your core, always happens in solitude. It's like a caterpillar in its cocoon. The most important part of its transformation happens when it's completely alone. I've observed that the fear of walking alone keeps more people stuck than any other fear. They stay in unfulfilling relationships, remain in soul-crushing jobs, and continue down paths that drain their energy, all because they're afraid to stand alone. But here's the truth about that fear. It's an illusion. The moment you embrace walking alone, that fear transforms into power. The very thing you were afraid of becomes your greatest strength. Consider this. Every great idea, every revolutionary thought, every world-changing innovation started with someone who was willing to stand alone in their vision. They didn't wait for consensus. They didn't seek permission. They dared to walk an untraveled path. There's a certain magic that happens when you start walking alone. Opportunities that were hidden before suddenly become visible. Doors that seemed locked mysteriously open. Resources you never knew existed appear exactly when you need them. I've noticed something remarkable about those who master the art of walking alone. They develop an unshakable inner strength, not the kind of strength that needs to prove itself, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and where you're going. Let me tell you about the power of solitary reflection. When you spend time alone, really alone, your mind begins to solve problems you didn't even know you had. Solutions emerge naturally like bubbles rising to the surface still water. There's a rhythm to walking alone, a sacred tempo that matches the beating of your own heart. When you find this rhythm, everything falls into place. Your steps become sure, your vision becomes clear, your path becomes certain. Let me tell you about what I call the silent revolution of the soul. It happens when you finally stop seeking external validation and start listening to your inner voice. This is where true power begins to emerge. You see, in this world of constant connection, we've forgotten something vital, the art of being alone. Not just physically alone, but truly deeply comfortable in our own presence. This is where your real strength lies. I've noticed that life has a peculiar way of testing this truth. It will keep bringing you to crossroads, moments where the crowd goes one way, but your heart pulls you another. These moments aren't accidents, they're invitations to trust yourself. Hide above water for a moment. When it's disturbed, it becomes cloudy, making it impossible to see through. But when it's allowed to be still, it becomes crystal clear. Your mind works the same way. In solitude, everything becomes clearer. I've discovered something fascinating about success. The kind of success that lasts, that truly fulfills you, never comes from following someone else's path. It comes from having the courage to forge your own way, even when that means walking alone. Let me share with you what happens when you fully embrace walking alone. Your intuition becomes razor sharp. Your decisions become clearer. Your actions become more purposeful. Why? Because you're no longer clouded by others' expectations and opinions. There's a profound power in what I call sacred solitude. This isn't about isolation or loneliness. It's It's about creating space for your own wisdom to emerge. It's about trusting that the answers you seek are already within you. Consider how a seed grows. In complete darkness, alone underground, it begins its journey. It doesn't question its path. It doesn't seek validation. It simply grows toward the light it knows is there. You have this same wisdom within you. I've observed that the most powerful transformations happen in what I call the silent spaces. These are the moments between the noise, the peaceful periods when you're truly alone with your thoughts, your dreams, your inner knowing. You see, walking alone isn't just about physical solitude. It's about maintaining your inner sovereignty. It's about staying true to your vision even when others can't see it. It's about trusting your inner compass even when others question your direction. Let me tell you about what happens in the depths of solitude. There's a moment, a profound moment, when the noise of the world fades away and you begin to hear something extraordinary, the sound of your own truth. I've discovered that walking alone is like tuning into a frequency that most people never access. On this frequency, you can hear the whispers of your destiny, the subtle guidance of your intuition, the clear direction of your purpose. Think about the times when you felt most aligned, most authentic, most alive. I bet these weren't moments when you were following someone else's path. They were moments when you were brave enough to walk your own way. There's something remarkable that happens when you embrace solitude. Your energy changes, your presence shifts. People begin to notice something different about you, a quiet confidence, an unshakable certainty, a magnetic authenticity. I remember discovering that the fear of walking alone is actually the fear of meeting yourself. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you finally meet yourself in solitude, you realize there was nothing to fear at all. In fact, it's the beginning of true freedom. Consider how a mountain stands alone, unmoved by the opinions of clouds or the changing weather. It simply is what it is. This is the kind of strength you develop when you learn to walk alone. Not rigid strength, but unshakable presence. I've noticed that those who master walking alone develop what I call quiet power. It's not the kind of power that needs to announce itself. It's the kind of power that simply radiates from within, changing everything around it without effort. Let me share something about transformation. When you're constantly surrounded by others, you often transform into what they expect you to be. But in solitude, you transform into who you truly are. This is the power of walking alone. There's a sacred alchemy that happens in solitude. Your fears turn into strength. Your doubts transform into certainty. Your confusion becomes clarity. But this alchemy only works when you're brave enough to be alone with yourself. You see, walking alone isn't about separating yourself from others. It's about connecting with something deeper. Your own inner wisdom, your own truth, your own power. From this connection, all other connections become more authentic. Let me tell you about what I call the silent revolution. It's what happens when you stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. When you stop following footsteps and start creating your own path. I've observed that life has an interesting way of teaching us about walking alone. Sometimes it strips away everything familiar, not to punish us, but to show us our own strength. These moments aren't setbacks, they're setups for breakthrough. Think about how diamonds are formed under intense pressure, in complete darkness, totally alone. Your greatest strengths are forged in similar conditions. The moments that seem most challenging are often your greatest opportunities for growth. There's something powerful about what happens when you embrace walking alone. You start to notice things you never saw before. Opportunities become visible. Possibilities emerge. Solutions appear. Why? Because your vision isn't clouded by others' limitations. I remember discovering that solitude has its own language. It speaks in intuitive flashes, in sudden realizations, in moments of crystal clarity. But you can only learn this language when you're willing to be alone long enough to hear it. Consider how an eagle soars. It doesn't look to others for direction. It doesn't follow a predetermined path. It rides the currents of air, trusting its own instincts, confident in its ability to navigate. This is the essence of walking alone. I've noticed that those who master solitude develop what I call inner sight. They see beyond the surface of things. They perceive patterns others miss. They understand truths that can't be taught, only discovered through personal experience. Let me share something about power. Real power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. And this mastery can only be achieved in solitude, where you face yourself honestly and completely. There's a rhythm to walking alone, a natural flow that emerges when you stop resisting solitude and start embracing it. It's like finding your own unique frequency, your personal resonance with the universe. You see, when you walk alone, something extraordinary happens to your perception. The world becomes clearer, sharper, more vivid. You start to see reality not as others describe it, but as it truly is. Let me share with you what I call the wisdom of solitary moments. These are the insights that come when you're completely alone, fully present with yourself, deeply connected to your inner truth. I've discovered that walking alone awakens something dormant born in us. An ancient knowing, a deep wisdom that can't be accessed through books or teachers. It's the kind of wisdom that only emerges in the silence of solitude. Think about the times when you felt most certain about something, despite everyone telling you otherwise. That certainty didn't come from external validation, it came from that quiet place within where truth resides. There's a profound shift that occurs when you fully embrace walking alone. Your decisions become clearer, your actions more decisive, your path more defined. Why? Because you're no longer swayed by the countless opinions around you. I remember the moment I realized that walking alone isn't just about physical solitude. It's about maintaining your inner sovereignty in a world that constantly tries to shape you into something else. This is where true freedom begins. Consider how a tree grows through concrete. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't seek approval. It simply follows its natural impulse to grow, breaking through whatever stands in its way. This is the power you access when you walk alone. I've observed that those who master walking alone develop what I call unshakable presence. They carry themselves differently. They speak with quiet authority. They move through life with graceful certainty. Let me tell you about the transformation that happens in solitude. Your fears begin to lose their power. Your doubts start to dissolve. Your inner voice becomes stronger, clearer, more reliable. This is the alchemy of walking alone. There's something magical about the space that opens up when you embrace solitude. Ideas flow more freely. Solutions appear more readily. Inspiration comes more naturally. It's as if the universe has been waiting for you to create this space. You see, walking alone isn't about isolation. It's about integration. It's about bringing all parts of yourself together, about becoming whole, about discovering the completeness that already exists within you. Let me share with you the final truths about walking alone, the culmination of everything I've discovered on this path. This is where all the pieces come together. I've found that there's a moment in the journey of walking alone when everything suddenly makes sense. All the doubts, all the challenges, all the times you questioned yourself, they were all leading you to this moment of absolute clarity. You think about what happens when you finally stop resisting solitude and fully embrace it. A profound peace descends. A deep knowing emerges. An unshakable confidence arises. This is your natural state. This is who you truly are. There's an extraordinary power that manifests when you've mastered walking alone. You begin to attract exactly what you need. The right opportunities, the right circumstances, the right connections. They all appear naturally, effortlessly. I remember realizing that walking alone isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's not about reaching a destination. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Every step in solitude takes you closer to your authentic self. Consider this final truth: your path is uniquely yours. No one else can walk it for you. No one else can understand it completely. No one else can validate it. And that's exactly as it should be. I've witnessed that those who fully embrace walking alone eventually discover what I call the ultimate freedom. The freedom to be completely, unapologetically themselves. Let me share one last insight about this journey. Walking alone isn't about being alone forever. It's about becoming so complete within yourself that all your future connections come from a place of wholeness rather than need. This is where your journey truly begins. From this moment forward, you'll walk with a new understanding, a new confidence, a new power. You'll know deep in your heart that you're exactly where you need to be. Remember this, every step you take alone is a step toward your highest potential. Every moment you spend in solitude is an investment in your deepest wisdom. Every time you choose your own path, you're honoring your unique purpose. And now, as you move forward on your own path, know this, you carry within you everything you need. Your solitude is your strength. Your independence is your power. Your unique journey is your gift to the world. Walk alone with pride. Move forward with confidence. Stand tall in your truth. For in embracing your solitary path, you've discovered the greatest truth of all. The power to be uniquely, magnificently, unequivocally you. This is your time. This is your path. This is your truth. Walk it with courage, with grace, and with the deep knowing that you are exactly where you need to be. The journey of walking alone ends where it began, with you standing in your power, ready to create your own destiny. The path ahead is yours to define, yours to walk, yours to master. Step forward now into your own light, into your own truth, into your own power. For this is what it truly means to normalize walking some paths alone. Let us begin with a fundamental truth. In all of nature's most powerful transformations, there is no announcement, no declaration, no explanation. Consider how night turns to day. Does the sun send a warning before it rises? Does darkness announce its departure? No, my dear friends. The transition happens in perfect silence with absolute naturality. I remember a lady who came to me in Detroit. She had been struggling with a situation at her workplace that no longer served her highest good. For months, she had been announcing her intentions to leave, explaining her dissatisfaction to anyone who would listen, constantly declaring her upcoming departure. Yet she remained stuck, bound by invisible chains to the very situation she wished to leave. Then she heard this principle of silent departure, and everything changed. Let me share with you what I call the law of silent exodus. This law states that every significant transformation in your life must follow the pattern of nature's most powerful force, silence. Think about a leaf falling from a tree. Does it announce its departure? Does it explain to the other leaves why it must go? Does it seek validation for its decision to let go? No, it simply releases its hold when the time is right. And in that silent letting go, it finds its perfect path. You see, when you announce your intentions to leave, when you explain your reasons, when you seek validation for your departure, you are doing something profoundly destructive. You are diffusing the power of your decision. Every explanation, every announcement, every justification is like a small leak in a pressure vessel. The power that should be building to propel your transformation is instead being released in useless words and explanations. Let me tell you about the 3 silences of departure. The first silence is the silence of decision, when you make your choice without announcement. The second silence is the silence of preparation, when you ready yourself without explanation. The third silence is the silence of action, when you actually leave without declaration. I recall a gentleman in New York who mastered this principle perfectly. He had been in a business partnership that was draining his energy and resources. For years he had threatened to leave, announced his dissatisfaction, explained his position to everyone who would listen. Nothing changed. Then he heard these principles, and he understood something profound. He realized that his constant announcements were not expressions of power, but admissions of powerlessness. Every time he declared his intention to leave, he was actually affirming his inability to do so. In that moment of understanding, he did something remarkable. He went completely silent about his intentions. Let me share with you what I call the principle of silent power. This principle states that true power moves in silence, just as the most fundamental forces of nature operate without noise. Gravity doesn't announce its pull. Electricity doesn't explain its flow. The earth doesn't declare its rotation. Now, let me share with you what happened to this gentleman after he embraced the principle of silent departure. Without a word to anyone, without a single announcement or explanation, he began preparing for his exit. He didn't engage in discussions about his plans, didn't seek validation for his decision, didn't broadcast his intentions. This brings us to what I call the law of undiffused power. You see, every time you speak about your intentions to leave, you're diffusing the very power needed to accomplish it. It's like trying to build pressure in a vessel full of holes. The very act of announcing creates leaks through which your manifestation power escapes. Consider the biblical story of Mary, who upon receiving the most magnificent news of all, that she would bear the Christ child, kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. She didn't run to announce it to the world. She didn't seek validation from her friends. She held the power of her transformation in perfect silence. Let me introduce you to what I call the 5 chambers of silent departure. The first chamber is the chamber of decision, where you make your choice in absolute privacy. The second is the chamber of preparation, where you quietly ready yourself for transition. The third is the chamber of detachment, where you release emotional bonds without declaration. The fourth is the chamber of action, where you move without announcement. The fifth is the chamber of completion, where you maintain silence even after departure. I remember a woman in Los Angeles who mastered these chambers perfectly. She had been in a social circle that no longer matched her spiritual evolution. For months, she had talked about leaving, explained her reasons, justified her decision. But with each explanation, she found herself more firmly bound to the very situation she wished to leave. Then she understood these principles, and something profound happened. She entered the first chamber, making her decision in absolute privacy. No announcements, no explanations, no seeking of approval. In the second chamber, she quietly began preparing her consciousness for the transition, still maintaining perfect silence. Here's what you must understand about the power of undeclared intention. When you declare your intention to leave, you're actually creating resistance to your departure. Every announcement is met with an equal and opposite force, whether it's others' opinions, their attempts to persuade you otherwise, or their projection of doubt onto your decision. Think of a rocket leaving Earth's atmosphere. The most critical phase of its journey happens in silence, far above the clouds. If it were to announce its trajectory at every moment, if it were to seek validation for its path, it would never break free from Earth's gravitational pull. This brings us to what I call the silent point of power. This is the moment when you realize that your power to transform your reality lies not in your declarations, but in your silence. Not in your explanations, but in your quiet, unwavering assumption of the new state. Let me tell you about the 3 illusions of announced departure. The first illusion is that announcing your intention makes it more real. It doesn't. It makes it less real by diffusing your power. The second illusion is that explaining your reasons helps others understand. It doesn't. It only creates opportunities for doubt and opposition. The third illusion is that declaring your plans holds you accountable. It doesn't. It actually weakens your resolve by subjecting it to external opinions. Now let me share with you what I call the sacred mathematics of silence. In all of nature's most profound transformations, there is a mathematical precision to the power of silence. The less you speak about your departure, the more power accumulates for its manifestation. It's an inverse relationship that few understand, but all must master. I remember a student who came to me in San Francisco. He had been attempting to leave a career that no longer served his highest purpose. For years, he had been declaring his intentions, announcing his plans, explaining his reasons. With each declaration, he found himself more firmly entrenched in the very situation he wished to leave. Let me introduce you to the 7 seals of silent departure. The first seal is mental silence, keeping your decision private within your own mind. The second seal is emotional silence, maintaining calm detachment without external expression. The third seal is verbal silence, refusing to discuss your plans with anyone. The fourth seal is social silence, quietly withdrawing from situations that bind you to the old state. The fifth seal is digital silence, refraining from announcing your intentions on any platform. The sixth seal is spiritual silence, maintaining perfect faith without seeking validation. The seventh seal is manifest silence, allowing your actions alone to speak. Consider what I call the law of silent accumulation. Every moment you maintain silence about your departure, power accumulates in your consciousness. It's like filling a vessel with pressure. The more contained it is, the more powerful it becomes. But one small leak, one tiny announcement, and the power begins to dissipate. Let me tell you about a businessman in Chicago who mastered this principle. He had built a successful company but knew it was time to move on to greater endeavors. Instead of announcing his plans, instead of seeking advice or validation, he went into complete silence about his intentions. This brings us to the principle of silent magnetism. When you maintain perfect silence about your departure, you create what I call a vacuum of manifestation. Nature abhors a vacuum, and into this silence rushes all the power needed for your transition. Think of the caterpillar entering its chrysalis. Does it announce to the world that it's about to become a butterfly? Does it seek approval for its transformation? No, it enters the silence of its cocoon. And in that perfect silence, magic happens. Here's what you must understand about the three powers of silent departure. The first power is the power of containment, keeping your energy focused and undiffused. The second power is the power of accumulation, building momentum through perfect silence. The third power is the power of manifestation, allowing your transformation to occur without resistance. Let me share with you what I call the silent bridge. This is the invisible pathway that connects your current state to your desired state. Every word spoken about your crossing weakens this bridge. Every announcement creates vibrations that could collapse your passage. Let me share with you now what I call the law of silent momentum. Just as a river runs deepest where it's most silent, your power to depart grows strongest in complete silence. When you understand this law, you'll never again feel the need to announce your transitions. I remember a woman in Boston who came to me in tears. She had been trying to leave a relationship that no longer served her growth. For months, she had been declaring her intentions, threatening to leave and explaining her reasons. With each declaration, she found herself more deeply entangled in the very situation she wished to escape. Let me introduce you to the four chambers of silent power. The first chamber is the chamber of recognition, where you acknowledge that your power lies in silence. The second chamber is the chamber of resolve, where your decision becomes unshakable through silence. The third chamber is the chamber of action, where your movements become deliberate and soundless. The fourth chamber is the chamber of completion, where your transformation manifests without announcement. Consider what I call the principle of silent authority. True authority never needs to announce itself. Does the sun announce its power to shine? Does gravity declare its ability to hold planets in orbit? No, they simply operate in silent, perfect authority. Think about the mighty oak tree. When it decides to release a leaf, does it make an announcement? Does it hold a committee meeting with the other leaves? Does it explain its decision to the forest? No, it simply lets go when the time is right in perfect silence. Let me share with you the 5 illusions of announced departure. First illusion, I announce my departure, it becomes more real. Truth. Announcements actually dilute the reality of your intention. Second illusion, I need to explain so others understand. Truth. Understanding from others is not required for your transformation. Third illusion, declaring my plans holds me accountable. Truth. External accountability weakens your internal resolve. Fourth illusion, I owe others an explanation. Truth, your only obligation is to your own spiritual growth. Fifth illusion, speaking about it helps process the change. Truth, silent processing is infinitely more powerful than verbal processing. I knew a man in Philadelphia who mastered this understanding perfectly. He had been in a business partnership for 20 years. When he realized it was time to move on, he didn't announce his intention. He didn't seek validation. He didn't explain his reasons. Instead, he went into what I call the sacred silence of transition. This brings us to the law of silent preparation. Just as nature prepares all its greatest transformations in silence, the butterfly in its cocoon, the seed beneath the soil, the child in the womb, your greatest transformations must be prepared in silence. Now let me share with you what I call the principle of silent elevation. just as the eagle rises to its greatest heights without a sound. Your ascension to new states of being must happen in perfect silence. This is a law, not a suggestion. Consider what I call the 3 levels of silent mastery. The first level is physical silence, where your body moves without announcement. The second level is mental silence, where your mind plans without declaration. The third level is spiritual silence, where your soul transforms without proclamation. I remember a teacher who came to me in Seattle. She had been announcing her intentions to leave her profession for 5 years. 5 years of declarations, 5 years of explanations, 5 years of announcements. And for 5 years she remained exactly where she was, bound by the very words she thought would set her free. Let me introduce you to the silent path of power. This path has 7 stages, each more profound than the last. Stage 1, the recognition, understanding that true power moves in silence. Stage 2, the decision, making your choice without announcement. Stage 3, the preparation, reading yourself without declaration. Stage 4, the detachment, releasing bonds without explanation. Stage 5, the movement, taking action without proclamation. Stage 6, the transition, transforming without justification. Stage 7, the completion, arriving without celebration. This brings us to what I call the law of silent magnetism. When you maintain perfect silence about your departure, you create a magnetic field of manifestation. This field draws to you all the circumstances necessary for your transition, but it can only operate in silence. Think of the moon's influence on the tides. Does the moon announce its pull? Does it explain its gravitational force? No, it simply exerts its power in perfect silence, and the mighty oceans respond. Let me share with you the 4 pillars of silent power. First pillar, silent knowing, the deep understanding that your power lies in silence. Second pillar, silent movement, the ability to act without announcement. Third pillar, silent transformation, the capacity to change without declaration. Fourth pillar, silent completion, the power to arrive without explanation. I knew a businessman in New York who embodied these pillars perfectly. He had built $1 million company, and when he knew it was time to move on, he didn't announce it to his colleagues. He didn't explain it to his partners. He didn't declare it to his employees. Instead, he went into what I call the sacred chamber of silent execution. Consider what happened to a doctor in Miami who came to understand these principles. She had been in a medical practice that no longer aligned with her evolution. For years, she had been telling everyone about her plans to leave, seeking advice, explaining her position. And for years, she remained stuck, bound by the very words she thought would liberate her. Let me introduce you to the 9 secrets of silent power. First secret, power accumulates in silence. Second secret, movement is strongest when unannounced. Third secret, transformation requires no explanation. Fourth secret, true authority needs no declaration. Fifth secret, real change happens in silence. Sixth secret, power moves without sound. Seventh secret, silence builds momentum. Eighth secret, unspoken intentions manifest fastest. Ninth secret, the less you say, the more you accomplish. This brings us to what I call the law of silent momentum. Just as a snowball rolling down a mountain gains size and speed in silence, your power to manifest grows exponentially when kept in perfect silence. Think about what I call the 3 chambers of silent execution. First chamber, the chamber of decision, where you make your choice in absolute privacy, letting no word escape about your intentions. In this chamber, you hold your decisions sacred, understanding that each word spoken dilutes its power. Second chamber, the chamber of preparation, where you ready yourself in complete silence, gathering your resources, strengthening your resolve, all without a single announcement or explanation. Third chamber, the chamber of action, where you move with the silence of a shadow, executing your plans with the quiet precision of natural law. Let me tell you about the 5 commands of silent departure. First command, thou shalt not announce thy intentions. Second command, thou shalt not seek validation for thy decision. Third command, thou shalt not explain thy reasons. Fourth command, thou shalt not justify thy actions. Fifth command, thou shalt move in perfect silence. Now, my dear friends, let me share with you what I call the ultimate law of silent achievement. When you understand this law, you'll never again question the power of silence in transformation. Every great achievement in history has followed this pattern of silent execution. Consider what Scripture tells us: be still and know that I am God. This stillness, this divine silence, is not just about physical quiet. It's about maintaining perfect silence in your mind, your emotions, and your actions as you transition from one state to another. Let me share the final mysteries of silent power. The mystery of silent dignity. When you leave without announcement, you maintain a dignity that no explanation can provide. You see, explanations often become apologies, and apologies diminish your power. The mystery of silent strength. True strength never announces itself. The lion doesn't roar to prove its power. It moves in silence until action is necessary. The mystery of silent success. The greatest successes happen like the dawn, gradually, silently, but with absolute certainty. I want to leave you with what I call the 7 sacred truths of silent departure. First truth, your silence is your power. Second truth, your departure needs no announcement. Third truth, your transformation requires no explanation. Fourth truth, your movement demands no declaration. Fifth truth, your evolution seeks no validation. Sixth truth, your growth needs no justification. Seventh truth, your success requires no proclamation. Remember this eternal truth. The power to transform your life lies not in your declarations, but in your silence. Not in your announcements, but in your quiet assumption of the new state. Not in your explanations, but in your silent execution. As we conclude tonight, I want you to imagine yourself as the mighty ocean, powerful not because it announces its strength, but because it simply aye-ayes. The ocean doesn't explain why it moves. It doesn't announce its tides. It doesn't declare its depths. It simply operates in perfect harmony with divine law. Go forth now, not in doubt, not in fear, but in the absolute knowing that as you maintain your silence, as you move without announcement, your transformation must manifest its law. Remember these final words: your silence is your strength. Your quiet departure is your power. Your unannounced transition is your pathway to freedom. Maintain this silence, maintain this sacred discretion, and watch as your world transforms to match your silent assumption. For in the end, it is not in the noise of announcement, but in the silence of execution that all things are created. It is not in the clamor of explanation, but in the quiet of determined action that transformation occurs. Go now in silence, in confidence, in the absolute knowing that what you desire is already yours. For in consciousness, all things are possible to him who believes and maintains the silence of that belief. Good night, and God bless you all. My dear wonderful friends, tonight we will explore one of the most powerful yet misunderstood principles in the art of manifestation, the divine law of silence and selective association. Many of you have come to me asking, Neville, why do my manifestations sometimes fail? Or why do things seem to fall apart just when they're about to succeed? Tonight I will share with you a profound truth that will transform your understanding of the law. Let me begin by telling you why silence is not merely the absence of speech, but the very foundation of your creative power. In Scripture we read, "Be still and know that I am God." This stillness, this divine silence, is not a mere suggestion. It is the very secret of creation itself. Consider how God created the world. Did he announce his intentions to anyone? Did he seek validation or approval? No, my dear friends. In the depths of silence, in the quiet of his own being, he spoke the words, "Let there be," and it was done. This is your pattern. This is your blueprint. I remember who came to me in New York. She had been trying to manifest a specific position in her company, a position that seemed impossible to obtain given her current status. She had told everyone about her desire, seeking advice, validation, and support. For months, nothing happened. Then she heard this principle of silence and everything changed. She did something remarkable. She cut off all discussion of her desire. She stopped seeking opinions, stopped announcing her intentions, and most importantly, she went into what I call the sacred silence. Within 3 weeks, not only was she offered the position she desired, but she was offered an even better one she hadn't even imagined possible. You see, when you speak of your desires to others, you are diffusing your creative power. Every time you discuss your intentions, you are releasing the pressure of the creative force that should be building within you. It's like puncturing a balloon. Before it's fully inflated, the air escapes, and the balloon never reaches its intended form. Let me share with you what I call the law of sacred silence. This law states that every desire has its own gestation period, just as every seed has its own time of growth. When you plant a seed in the ground, do you dig it up every day to check its progress? Do you tell everyone about the seed you've planted and ask their opinion on whether it will grow? Of course not. You plant it in the silence of the earth and let it grow undisturbed. Your desires are spiritual seeds, and your consciousness is the soil in which they grow. Every time you speak of your desires to others, you are essentially digging up your seed to show it to the world. How can it grow if you don't give it the silence it needs to take root? But tonight, I want to take you deeper than you've ever gone before into understanding why cutting all contacts is equally crucial to your manifestation. This is not about isolation, it's about insulation. You must insulate your consciousness from the doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs of others. Consider the story of Noah. Before the flood came, he was instructed to enter the ark and seal it. This is not a historical account, but a psychological drama playing out in consciousness. The ark represents your consciousness, and sealing it represents cutting off contact with all that would disturb your assumption of the wish fulfilled. Many of you maintain relationships and connections that constantly pull you back into old states of consciousness. Try to rise to a new level of being while staying connected to those who know you as you were, not as you desire to be. This is like trying to fly while keeping your feet chained to the ground. Let me tell you about a student of mine who understood this principle perfectly. He desired to move from poverty to wealth, but he realized that his daily associations were keeping him anchored in the consciousness of lack. His friends, though well-meaning, constantly spoke of limitations, of how difficult it was to make money, of how the economy was against them. He made a bold decision. He temporarily cut all contacts that reinforced the old state of poverty consciousness. He didn't do this unkindly or abruptly, but he quietly withdrew from circles that kept him tied to the old state. Instead of spending evenings discussing lack with his usual companions, he went into silence and lived in the assumption of his wish fulfilled. The results were extraordinary. Within 6 months, his entire financial reality transformed. But notice something crucial. He didn't announce his intentions to withdraw. He didn't make declarations about cutting contacts. He simply did it in silence, with the same naturalness with which you would close a door to keep out the cold. Now let me share with you what I call the 3 chambers of silence. The first chamber is physical silence, the cessation of speaking about your desires. The second chamber is mental silence, the quieting of internal chatter and doubt. The third chamber, and most profound, is spiritual silence, the complete surrender to the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Many of you enter the first chamber easily enough. You can stop talking about your desires. Some of you even master the second chamber, controlling your thoughts. But it's the third where the real power lies, and this chamber can only be entered when you cut the ties that bind you to your old state. Think of Lot's wife in Scripture. She was told not to look back at the city she was leaving. This is not a story about physical geography. It's about consciousness. When you're moving into a new state of being, you cannot keep looking back at the old state or maintaining connections with those who are not old state. Let me tell you about the law of state resonance. Everything and everyone in your life is a reflection of the state you occupy. When you try to enter a new state while maintaining connections with those who resonate with your old state, you create a psychological conflict that prevents your complete transformation. I recall a gentleman in Los Angeles who desired to become a renowned author. He had talent, he had ideas, but he remained stuck in obscurity. Why? Because he kept himself surrounded by people who knew him as a struggling writer. Their very presence in his life kept him anchored to that state of struggle. One day, after hearing these principles, he did something that seemed drastic to others, but was perfectly natural to him. He cut all contacts with his writing group, stopped attending literary gatherings where people complained about how hard it was to get published, and went into complete silence about his work. Instead of discussing his book with others, he lived in the silence of his completed wish. He would walk into bookstores and quietly see his book on the shelves. He would silently feel the weight of his published work in his hands. He stopped seeking validation, stopped asking for opinions, and most importantly, stopped connecting with those who knew him as anything less than a successful author. Here's what you must understand about the power of cutting contacts. It's not about avoiding people. It's about avoiding states. Every person in your life represents a state of consciousness. When you maintain connections with those who know you in your old state, you're making it infinitely harder to fully occupy your new state. Consider the biblical instruction, "Come out from among them and be ye separate." This is not about physical separation, but about separating yourself from states that contradict your desire. When you truly understand this, you'll see why maintaining certain contacts keeps you bound to states you're trying to leave. Let me introduce you to what I call the principle of state solidarity. This principle states that your consciousness naturally seeks alignment with the predominant consciousness of those around you. This is why being around people who knew you in your old state makes it challenging to maintain your new assumption. Think of it like tuning a radio. You're trying to tune into the frequency of your desire, but the old contacts in your life keep pulling the dial back to the old frequency. The solution is not to fight against this pulling. The solution is to remove yourself from the range of the old frequency entirely. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Neville, isn't it selfish to cut contacts with people? Let me tell you something profound. You're not cutting contact with people. You're cutting contact with states. When you successfully establish yourself in your new state, you'll find that some of these people will either transform with you or naturally fall away. Let me share with you what I call the law of silent transformation. When a caterpillar enters its cocoon, it doesn't announce its transformation. It doesn't seek approval from other caterpillars. It doesn't maintain connections with its caterpillar life. In perfect silence, in complete isolation, it undergoes its magnificent transformation. This is your pattern. When you're transforming into a new state of consciousness, you must enter your own psychological cocoon. This is why silence and cutting contacts are not just helpful suggestions. They are spiritual imperatives. I remember a woman in my New York lectures who desired marriage. She had been dating for years, constantly discussing her relationships with friends, always seeking advice, always maintaining connections with people who knew her as the single friend. She was constantly in what I call the state of seeking. After learning these principles, she did something revolutionary. She cut all contacts with her dating circles, stopped discussing relationships entirely, and withdrew from the constant social commentary about her love life. Instead, she went into complete silence and lived in the assumption of being happily married. Her friends thought she had become antisocial. Some even criticized her for withdrawing, but she understood something they didn't. She couldn't become the woman she desired to be while maintaining connections that kept her in the state of seeking. Here's what you must understand about the power of silence. It's not merely the absence of noise, it's the presence of power. When you go into silence about your desires, when you cut contacts with those who know you as you were, you are creating a vacuum in consciousness. And nature abhors a vacuum? Let me introduce you to the 4 stages of silent creation. The first stage is recognition, recognizing that your current contacts and conversations are keeping you bound to your old state. The second stage is withdrawal, quietly removing yourself from environments and relationships that reinforce the old state. The third stage is silence, maintaining complete silence about your transformation. The fourth stage is emergence, naturally revealing your new state once it's fully embodied. Most people fail because they try to skip stages. They recognize the need for change but maintain all their old contacts. They try to withdraw but keep announcing their withdrawal. They attempt silence, but keep checking if it's working. Remember, a seed doesn't grow faster because you keep checking on it. Consider Joseph in Scripture. When he received his dream of greatness, did he maintain connections with those who knew him as a slave? No. He was separated from all his old contacts, placed in what appeared to be adverse circumstances. But these very circumstances were preparing him for his transformation. This brings us to what I call the principle of sacred separation. Just as a pregnant woman carries her unborn child in the silence and privacy of her psalm, you must carry your desire in the silence and privacy of your consciousness. Every time you discuss it, every time you maintain contact with those who doubt it, you're exposing your unborn desire to harmful elements. Let me tell you about a businessman who came to me in desperate circumstances. His company was failing, and he had been constantly discussing his problems with everyone who would listen. His entire network consisted of people who knew him as the owner of a struggling business. I shared with him these principles, and he understood them at a deep level. He stopped attending business networking events where people discussed market difficulties. He cut contacts with his commiseration circle, those friends who gathered to share business troubles. He went into complete silence about his company status. Instead of seeking advice, he sought silence. Instead of maintaining connections that reinforced failure, he insulated his consciousness in the assumption of success. To the outside world, he seemed to have become a recluse. But in the silence of his consciousness, a transformation was taking place. What happened next illustrates perfectly what I call the law of silent attraction. Within 3 months, his business began attracting opportunities that had been there all along, but were invisible to him while he was in the state of struggle and constant discussion. You see, when you're constantly talking about your problems, constantly maintaining contacts with those who reinforce your limitations, you're blind to the opportunities surrounding you. Let me share with you the deeper metaphysical reason why silence and cutting contacts are so crucial. In Scripture, we read, "In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength." This is not merely poetic language, it's a precise description of the law of consciousness. When you maintain silence and cut contacts with the old state, you're doing something profound. You're creating what I call a consciousness vacuum. Nature must fill this vacuum, but it can only fill it with whatever corresponds to your assumed state. Consider this principle: every person in your life is a mirror reflecting back to you your state of consciousness. When you maintain contacts with those who knew you in your old state, you're constantly being reminded of who you were, not who you desire to be. This is why cutting contacts is not an act of rejection, but an act of spiritual wisdom. I remember a teacher who came to me. She had been trying to manifest a position at a prestigious university, but she kept herself surrounded by colleagues who knew her as a struggling substitute teacher. Every conversation, every interaction, every relationship reinforced her current state. She understood these principles and did something that seemed radical to others. She quietly withdrew from her regular social circles. She stopped attending teachers' gatherings where the conversation centered around limited opportunities. She cut contacts with those who consistently reminded her of her current circumstances. Instead, she went into what I call the silence of assumption. In this silence, free from the constant reinforcement of her old state, she lived completely in the assumption of being a distinguished professor. She didn't tell anyone about this inner transformation. She didn't seek validation. She simply lived in the silence of her fulfilled desire. Here's what you must understand about the power of sacred isolation. When you isolate yourself from influences that contradict your desired state, you're not being antisocial, you're being spiritually wise. Just as a scientist must create a controlled environment for certain experiments, you must create a controlled environment in consciousness for your transformation. Let me introduce you to what I call the 7 seals of silence. The first seal is physical withdrawal, removing yourself from environments that reinforce the old state. The second seal is social disconnection, cutting contacts with those who know you only as you were. The third seal is conversational silence, refusing to discuss your transformation or desire. The fourth seal is mental quietude, silencing the internal dialogue about your past state. The fifth seal is emotional stillness, maintaining calm confidence in your assumption. The sixth seal is spiritual insulation, protecting your consciousness from doubt and disbelief. The seventh seal is complete absorption, living entirely in the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Each of these seals must be maintained if you wish to complete your transformation. Breaking even one seal can allow the old state to seep back into your consciousness. Consider the biblical story of the three wise men. After they saw the Christ child, they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod. This is a psychological truth. Once you've conceived your new state, seeing the Christ child, you must not return to the old state, Herod. You must take another way home. Now let me share with you what I call the ultimate law of silent achievement. When you understand this law, you'll never again question the power of silence and selective contact. Every great achievement in history, every significant transformation has followed this pattern of silence and sacred isolation. Think of Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days. Think of Buddha leaving his palace and social circles. Think of every great inventor, artist, or visionary who withdrew from society to birth their creation. This is not coincidence, it's law. Let me tell you about my own experience with this principle. When I first discovered these truths, I didn't announce them to the world. I went into silence. I cut contacts with those who knew me as the old man. In that silence, in that sacred isolation, I experienced what I call the great knowing. Here's what you must do starting tonight. First, make a solemn covenant with yourself, a covenant of silence. No more discussing your desires, your plans, your transformations with anyone. Second, begin what I call the great withdrawal, systematically cutting contacts with those who hold you in your old state. But remember, this is not about physical isolation, it's about state isolation. You're not rejecting people, you're rejecting states of consciousness that no longer serve your transformation. I'll share with you the 5 commands of silent power. Thou shalt not speak of thy desire to anyone. Thou shalt cut all contacts that anchor thee to the old state. Thou shalt live completely in the silence of thy wish fulfilled. Thou shalt not return to check on thy progress. Thou shalt maintain thy silence until thy manifestation is complete. These commands are not suggestions, they are spiritual laws that must be obeyed if you wish to transform your reality. Consider this final principle I call the law of silent emergence. Just as a butterfly emerges from its cocoon, only when its transformation is complete, you should only re-emerge into the world when your new state is fully embodied. Let me tell you about the 3 signs of complete transformation. First, when your new state feels more natural than your old state. Second, when maintaining silence requires no effort. Third, when your old contacts naturally fall away or transform to match your new state. Remember, my dear friends, that silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. Cutting contacts is not the absence of relationship. It's the presence of spiritual wisdom. As we conclude tonight's talk, I want to leave you with this final truth. Your world is your consciousness pushed out. Every person, every circumstance, every condition in your life is there because of the state you occupy. When you change your state in silence, when you cut contacts with the old state, you automatically change your world. Go forth now in doubt, not in fear, but in the absolute knowing that as you maintain your silence, as you cut contacts with the old state, your transformation must manifest. It's law. Remember these words from Scripture. Be still and know that I am God. This stillness, this silence, this sacred isolation, this is your path to transformation. And now, my dear wonderful friends, as we close this evening, take with you this solemn truth: your silence is your power. Your withdrawal from the old state is your pathway to the new. Maintain this silence, maintain this sacred isolation, and watch as your world transforms to match your silent assumption. For in the end, it is not in the noise of the world, but in the silence of your consciousness that all things are created. It is not in maintaining old contacts, but in sacred isolation that transformation occurs. Go now in silence and confidence in the absolute knowing that what you desire is already yours. For in consciousness, all things are possible to him who believes and maintains the silence of that belief. Good night and God bless you all. In your world today, you've been conditioned to believe that effort, struggle, and constant striving are the pathways to your desires. The world teaches you to push harder, to fight more fiercely, to compete more intensely. But I tell you this, the very act of trying is the confession that you do not have. And as long as you are trying to get something, you are confirming its absence in your experience. Let me share with you a principle that I know to be true, not as theory, but as a law I have proven countless times. The more you try to get something, the more you push it away. This is the law of reverse effort, and it operates with mathematical precision in our universe. When you try to get something, you are automatically confessing that you don't have it, and what you confess you possess. I think about it for a moment. When you try to fall asleep, does sleep come? No, the harder you try, the more elusive sleep becomes. When you try to remember a name, does it come to you? No. It's only when you stop trying, when you relax your mind, that the name flows effortlessly into your consciousness. This is the secret I'm sharing with you tonight. Now let me take you to scripture. For the Bible is the greatest psychological document ever written. In the book of Matthew, it is written, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Notice carefully the tense used here. It doesn't say believe you will receive it, but believe that you have received it. This is the key to all manifestation. The great error of humanity is that they're trying to get what they already have. You are trying to become what you already are. The very moment you desire something, that which you desire already exists in what I call your imaginal act. It is already yours in the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm is the cause, while the physical realm is but the effect. Let me share with you a personal experience. Years ago when I was in Barbados, I desired to go to America. Everyone told me it was impossible during wartime. The quota was small, and the waiting list was long. But I discovered this principle I'm sharing with you tonight. Instead of trying to get to America, I assumed I was already there. I lived in the end, in the feeling of already being in America. I walked the streets of New York in my imagination. I felt the cold winter air on my face. I saw the tall buildings. I lived from that state of consciousness. I did not try to get there. I lived as though I was already there. And then the most extraordinary series of events unfolded. A man I had never met facilitated my journey. And within months, I was standing on the very streets I had walked in my imagination. You see, the secret is not in the trying, but in the assuming of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, let me show you how this principle operates in every area of your life. Whether it's money, love, health, or success, the law remains the same. The moment you stop trying to get it and simply assume you have it, the entire universe reorganizes itself to make it so. But you must understand, this is not positive thinking or wishful thinking. This is the law of consciousness. Consider this. Everything in your world is pushed out of your consciousness. Your consciousness is the only reality. When you try to get something, you are pushing out the consciousness of lack, of not having. But when you assume you already have it, when you live in the end, you push out the consciousness of possession, of having. Let me give you a technique I have taught to thousands, and it has never failed when properly applied. Instead of trying to get what you want, every night as you lay down to sleep, assume you already have it. Feel the naturalness of having it. Create a scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire. Feel the joy, the satisfaction, the completeness of possession. Then fall asleep in that state. You see, sleep is the state of consciousness where your subconscious mind is most receptive. As you fall asleep feeling you already have what you desire, you are impregnating your subconscious with the seed of fulfillment. And just as the seed must fall into the earth and die to its current form to be reborn as something greater, your conscious mind must fly into the sleep state while holding the feeling of fulfillment. This is what is meant in scripture when it says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field." Your desire planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind through the feeling of fulfillment, must grow and manifest in your world. But remember, you must stop trying. Trying implies effort, and effort implies lack. Instead, live in the absolute assumption that what you desire is already yours. Feel its reality now. Experience the joy of possession now. Let every action, every word, every thought spring from the consciousness of already being what you want to be, having what you want to have. Many of you may be thinking, but Neville, how can I assume something is mine when my senses tell me otherwise? This is where the art of consciousness comes into play. Your physical senses show you the harvest of your previous assumptions. They show you the effects, not the cause. The cause lies in your consciousness, and that is where the change must take place. When you walk into your room at night, you don't try to get light. You simply flick the switch, assuming the light will come on. You don't stand there trying to make the light appear. You act with the absolute confidence that the light will respond to your action. This is how you must be with all your desires. Let me share another principle that few understand. The outside world is dead. It has no power to give you anything or take anything away. It is simply responding to your consciousness. When you try to change things on the outside without changing your consciousness, you are like someone trying to change their reflection in the mirror without changing their face. Your world is yourself pushed out. Every person, every circumstance, every event in your life is yourself pushed out. When you try to change them through effort, you are working on the reflection. But when you change your consciousness, when you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, the reflection must change. This is why Scripture tells us, be still and know that I am God. This stillness is not physical stillness, but the stillness of trying. It is the cessation of effort. It is the complete acceptance that what you desire is already yours. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. This is not a lesson in laziness, but a profound spiritual truth. The lily doesn't try to grow. It grows by allowing the life force within it to express itself perfectly. You are that lily. Your desires are the perfect pattern of your unfolding. But when you try to force them into being, you interfere with the perfect pattern. You introduce struggle where there should be only allowance. Let me give you a practical exercise. Tonight, when you go home, take your desire, whatever it may be, and create a scene that would imply its fulfillment. Make it as natural as possible. If your desire is for a new home, feel yourself living in that home. Feel the texture of the furniture. Walk from room to room. Feel the joy of ownership. Then, and this is crucial, don't try to make it happen. Simply know that by feeling the reality of it, you have set in motion the law that must bring it into your physical experience. Remember, the feeling is the secret. Not the trying, not the effort, but the feeling. Feel as you would feel if your desire were already a physical fact. Persist in that feeling and watch how life rearranges itself to match your assumption. Now let me address something that often confuses people. They ask, but Neville, doesn't this mean we should do nothing? No, that's not what I'm teaching. Action will come, but it will be inspired action, not forced action. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you will be moved to take whatever action is necessary, but it will feel natural and effortless. Think of a composer writing music. He doesn't try to compose, he listens inwardly and records what he hears. Think of a great artist painting. They don't try to paint, they allow the image within to express itself through them. This is how you must be with your desires. The great secret is this: the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the very feeling that seals its fulfillment. The more you try to get it, the more you affirm its absence. But when you live in the end, when you possess it in consciousness, the trying ceases and the having begins. Let me share one more biblical reference that beautifully illustrates this principle. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. This is telling you that the moment you desire something, it is already accomplished in consciousness. Your work is not to get it, but to accept it, to assume it, to live in the end. As we conclude tonight's discussion, I want you to grasp this fundamental truth. Everything you desire desires you. Everything you want wants you. But as long as you try to get it, you create resistance. The moment you assume you have it, all resistance dissolves. Tonight, dare to assume you are what you want to be. Dare to assume you have what you want to have. Don't try to make it happen. Know that it is already done. Live from that assumption and watch the miracle unfold. Remember, consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being and having, you must become and have. The world is yourself pushed out. Change your concept of yourself, and you change your world. Stop trying to get it, and you'll have it. This is the law, and there is no other way under heaven by which anything is accomplished. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and all that you desire is already there, waiting for you to stop trying to get it, and simply accept it as yours. Now, go in peace, knowing that what I have told you tonight is true. Apply this law, test it, prove it in the laboratory of daily life. For I tell you, with God all things are possible, and God is your own wonderful human imagination. Many of you came to me after our previous discussions asking, but Neville, if I stop trying, won't everything fall apart? Let me tell you a story that will illuminate this principle further. There was a lady in my audience in New York who had been trying to sell her house for 2 years. She had listed it with countless agents, reduced the price repeatedly, and was constantly trying to make the sale happen. After hearing this principle, she did something remarkable. She went home that night and did what I'm teaching you. Instead of trying to sell the house, she assumed it was already sold. She sat in her favorite chair and constructed a scene implying the sale was completed. In her imagination, she held the check in her hands, feeling its crisp texture. She felt the joy and relief of the completed sale. Most importantly, she stopped trying to sell it. Within 1 week, a buyer appeared who purchased the house at her original asking price. You see, the lady's constant trying was her confession of not having, and therefore she could only reap the harvest of not having. The moment she assumed the completed state, the law of consciousness had to operate to bring it into her experience. Let me take you deeper into scripture, for remember, the Bible is not telling the story of historical events, but is revealing eternal psychological truths. Consider the story of the Israelites trying to enter the promised land. For 40 years they wandered in the wilderness, trying to reach their destination. But it was only when they stopped trying, when they followed the instruction to stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, that the walls of Jericho fell and they entered their promised land. This is not just a historical account, it is your story. Your desire is your promised land, and your trying is your wilderness wandering. The walls of Jericho represent all the seeming obstacles between you and your desire. But these walls fall not by effort, but by assumption. Now, let me give you a practical technique that I call the Sabbath. In Scripture, God rested on the seventh day, not because he was tired, but because the work was done. This is your guide. When you properly assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you too must rest from your mental labor of trying to make it happen. This is your Sabbath. Every time you find yourself trying to make something happen, catch yourself and remember, the trying is a confession of absence. Instead, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and rest in that assumption. This is what it means to enter into his rest. Consider how you operate when you truly have something. When you have money in the bank, do you try to have it? No, you simply know it's there. When you are in your own home, do you try to be there? Of course not. You simply are there. This is how you must be with your desires. Let me share another principle that few understand. Your consciousness is God's gift to you, but what you do with it is your gift to God. When you try to get something, you are essentially telling God that his gift is incomplete, that something is missing. But when you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are accepting the gift in its completeness. Many of you have asked me about taking action. Never you say, if I stop trying, should I stop doing? No, my dear friends, action will still occur. But it will be inspired action rather than desperate action. When you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, you will be moved to take whatever action is necessary, but it will feel natural and effortless. Think of a bird building its nest. It doesn't try to build, it simply follows its inner pattern. The action flows naturally from its state of consciousness. This is how your action should flow, not from trying, but from being. Here's a profound truth. The universe cannot give you what you want. It can only give you what you are. As long as you are trying to get something, you are being someone who lacks that thing. But when you assume the consciousness of having it, you become someone who has it, and the universe must respond accordingly. Let me give you another technique to apply this principle. I call it the morning watch. When you first wake up in the morning, before you engage with the world, take a few moments to establish the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Don't try to make your day good, assume it is good. Don't try to be successful, assume you are successful. Start each day not by trying to get what you want, but by assuming you already have it. Remember the words of scripture, let the weak say, I am strong. Notice it doesn't say, let the weak try to become strong. This is the law of assumption in operation. You assume the state you desire to express, and that assumption persisted in will harden into fact. Consider your own experience. When you know something with absolute certainty, do you try to know it? No. The trying comes only with uncertainty. This is why I tell you, the feeling of certain of already having or being what you desire is the key to manifestation. Many of you are wondering about the time it takes for your assumption to become your physical reality. Remember, time is not a distance we travel. It is a bridge we cross in consciousness. The moment you fully assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you have crossed that bridge. What appears as time is simply the journey of that assumption through the dimensions of your world. Let me share another secret. The feeling of relief is one of the most powerful feelings you can cultivate. When you try to get something, you feel tension. But when you have something, you feel relief. This is why it's so important to capture and maintain the feeling of relief that comes with fulfillment. I've taught thousands of students, and those who succeed are invariably those who master this art of feeling relief instead of trying. They learn to live from the end instead of trying to reach the end. They understand that the end is where we begin, not where we arrive. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Neville, my desire seems so big, so impossible. Let me remind you of something. Size exists only in the world of effects, not in consciousness. In consciousness, the oak is not bigger than the acorn. They are the same thing in different states. Your desire, no matter how grand it seems, is not bigger than your capacity to assume its fulfillment. This is why scripture tells us all things are possible to him that believeth. Notice it doesn't say to him that tries, but to him that believeth. Belief is not trying to believe. It is the feeling of knowing. When you know something, you don't try to know it. You simply know it. Let me tell you about one of my most remarkable students. She was a woman who had been deaf in one ear for over 40 years. Medical science had declared her condition permanent, but she understood this principle deeply. Instead of trying to hear, she assumed she was hearing perfectly. She didn't try to heal her ear. She simply lived from the assumption of perfect hearing. Within 2 months, her hearing was completely restored, baffling her doctors. This brings us to what I call the law of perpetual creation. Every moment of your life you are creating through your assumptions. When you try to get something, you are assuming you don't have it, and therefore creating more of not having it. This is why it's so crucial to master your assumptions. Here's a practical exercise I call the daily reset. 3 times each day, morning, noon, night, take a moment to reset your assumptions. Ask yourself, if I had what I desire, what would I be assuming right now? Then assume that. Don't try to make it true. Know that your assumption makes it true. Remember the biblical story of the prodigal son. Notice that the father didn't try to make his son return. He assumed the return in his heart. And that assumption drew the son home. This is how your consciousness works. It draws to you whatever you assume to be true. Let me share one more technique, the mirror method. When you look in the mirror, don't try to see what you want to see. Instead, assume you are seeing what you want to see. Your physical reflection may not change immediately, but persist in this assumption, and your reflection must conform to your consciousness. Now, some of you might be wondering about action. Remember, this principle, right action, flows naturally from right consciousness. When you assume the state of your wish fulfilled, you will be moved to take whatever action is necessary. But it will be inspired action, not desperate action. Consider how you act when you have something you once wanted. There's no trying, no forcing, no struggling. You simply act from the state of having it. This is how you should act now, from the assumption of already being or having what you desire. Let me address those of you who are impatient for results. Impatience is just another form of trying. When you truly assume something is yours, you become patient because you know it's already yours. The seed doesn't try to become a tree. It contains the tree and naturally becomes it. Here's what I call the Sabbath state. In this state, you rest from all trying because you know it is finished. This doesn't mean you become inactive. It means you act from the certainty of fulfillment, rather than the uncertainty of trying to achieve. Remember, every time you find yourself trying, it's your signaling. Don't try to stop trying, that's more trying. Instead, simply assume the state where trying is unnecessary, because you already have what you desire. As we conclude tonight, let me leave you with this final truth. You are not going to get what you want. You are going to get what you are. Therefore, instead of trying to get something, be the person who already has it. Live from that assumption and watch as your world reshapes itself to match your new state of consciousness. The practice is simple, but it requires vigilance. Watch your assumptions as carefully as you would watch your step in a dangerous place. Your assumptions are creating your future right now. Remember, this principle of stop trying to get it in you'll have it is not just a technique. It's a fundamental law of consciousness. It operates whether you believe in it or not, just as gravity operates whether you believe in it or not. Go forth now, not to try but to assume, not to become but to be, not to get but to have. For in consciousness, where all creation takes place, what you assume as true is true, and what you believe you have, you have. And now, my dear friends, our discussion comes to a close. But remember, what you've heard tonight is not just information to be remembered. It's truth to be lived. Let every moment of trying become your reminder to assume. Let every appearance of lack become your opportunity to assume abundance. For in the end, it is not the trying, but the assuming that creates your world. And when you truly understand this, you will know the peace that comes from ceasing all trying and resting in the assumption of your wish fulfilled. Good night, and God bless you all. Let me share something remarkable with you. Last week, a man came to me after one of my lectures. He was successful by worldly standards, wealthy, respected, accomplished. Yet there was an emptiness in his eyes that spoke volumes. He said to me, "Neville, I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, but I still don't know who I am." You see, my beloved friends, this is the greatest tragedy of human existence, to live an entire life without discovering your true identity. Most people live and die as strangers to themselves, wearing masks so long they've forgotten their true face. Tonight, I want to share with you the profound truth that has transformed countless lives. The truth that will set you free from all limitations once you truly grasp it. That truth is simply this: you are the living manifestation of God Himself, temporarily dwelling in human form. Now, I know this might sound startling to some of you. You might be thinking, "Neville, surely you don't mean that literally." But I tell you, with every fiber of my being, I mean exactly that. Let me share with you why this is not blasphemy, but the very truth that Scripture has been trying to tell us. You see, when God speaks of Himself in Scripture, He uses one name above all others, that's I am. When Moses asked God His name, God replied, "I am that I am." This wasn't just some mystical answer. It was the revelation of God's nature, and by extension, your nature. Think about it, my dear friends. What is the one thing you cannot deny about yourself? What is the one thing that remains constant throughout all your experiences? It is the simple awareness of being I am. Before you say I am rich or I am poor, I am successful or I am failing, there must first be this fundamental I am. This I am is God Himself, expressing as you. This is why Jesus said, "I and my Father are one." He wasn't claiming something unique to Himself. He was revealing a universal truth about human identity. Let me share an experience that will help illuminate this profound truth. A lady came to me burdened with years of self-doubt and limitation. I asked her to do a simple exercise. For the next 5 minutes, I said, strip away every label you've ever accepted about yourself. Remove every role, every title, every description. What remains? At first, she was uncomfortable with this exercise. Like most people, she had built her identity on external things, her roles, her relationships, her achievements. But as she persisted, something remarkable happened. She touched that pure awareness, that simple I am, and in that moment she knew who she truly was. You see, my wonderful friends, finding out who you are is not a process of accumulating more knowledge or gathering more experiences. It's actually a process of removing everything that you are not until only your true self remains. Think of it this way. If you had a golden statue and it was covered with layers of paint, finding the gold wouldn't involve adding anything. It would involve removing the layers that hide the gold. Your true self is like that gold. It's already there, perfect and complete, hidden beneath layers of accumulated ideas about who you think you are. This is why Scripture says, be still and know that I am God. Notice it doesn't say think about God or study about God. It says be still and know. This knowing comes not through the mind, but through direct experience of your own being. Let me share with you the 3 fundamental truths about your identity that you must grasp. First truth, you are not your body. Your body is something you have, not something you are. You say my body just as you say my car or my house. Whatever you can possess cannot be what you are. Second truth, you are not your thoughts. You can observe your thoughts, which proves you are the observer, not the thoughts themselves. The true you is the awareness in which thoughts appear. Third truth, you are not your roles or your story. All these are temporary expressions, but you are the eternal expresser. These truths lead us to a profound question. If you are not your body, not your thoughts, and not your roles, then who are you? This is where we must enter into what I call the sacred silence of self-discovery. Let me share something profound that happened in my own experience. One night, alone in my room in New York City, I entered into a state of deep contemplation. As I sat there, I began to strip away every concept I had ever held about myself. Layer after layer fell away, until suddenly, and I want you to listen to this carefully, I experienced myself as pure awareness, boundless and eternal. You see, this is not just theory or philosophy. This is practical metaphysics that transforms your entire existence. Let me share with you the 3 levels of self-discovery that you must navigate to find your true identity. The first level, the outer self. This is the self that most people live and die as, the personality, the social mask, the collection of habits and patterns that we show to the world. It's like an actor so immersed in a role that he's forgotten he's acting. Let me share a perfect example. A successful doctor came to me, completely identified with his profession. His entire sense of self was wrapped up in being Dr. Smith. When he lost his license due to a false accusation, he fell into deep depression. Why? Because he had confused his role with his reality. You see, my wonderful friends, roles are necessary for the play of life, but they are not who you are. You are the actor behind every role. This brings us to our second level. The second level, the inner self. Beneath the outer personality lies what I call the inner self, the consciousness that observes all your experiences. This is closer to your true identity. But even this is not the final truth. Think about it this way. When you say I had a thought, who is the I that had the thought? When you say I had a feeling, who is the I that experienced the feeling? There must be something prior to thoughts and feelings, something that is aware of them. This is why Scripture says the kingdom of heaven is within you. It's pointing to this deeper level of self, this inner awareness that witnesses all experiences but remains untouched by them. The third level, the divine self. Now we come to the ultimate truth about your identity, what I call the divine self. This is not something to be achieved or attained. It is what you eternally are. It is the I am that never changes, never begins, and never ends. Let me share a profound technique for discovering this divine self. I call it the reverse inquiry. Instead of asking, who am I? Assume the position of pure awareness and ask, who is asking this question? Keep following this inquiry back until you reach the source of all questions. You see, my beloved friends, discovering who you are is not really a process of becoming something new. It's a process of uncovering what you eternally are. It's like the sun hidden behind clouds. The clouds may come and go, but the sun remains eternally itself. This is why Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. He wasn't speaking of the personal Jesus, but of this eternal I am that is your true identity. You must learn to distinguish between your eternal nature and its temporary expressions. Let me share with you 3 practical exercises for discovering your true self. The first exercise, the silent witness. Throughout your day, practice being aware of being aware. Don't just experience your experiences, notice that you are the awareness in which all experiences appear. The second exercise, the sacred question. Repeatedly ask yourself, who is aware of this moment? Don't accept any verbal answer. Let the question take you deeper into pure awareness. The third exercise, the divine recognition. Whatever you experience, recognize that you are the consciousness in which it appears. You are not the passing show, but the eternal witness of the show. You see, my wonderful friends, most people spend their entire lives trying to become something, trying to achieve something, trying to gather experiences. But I tell you this, all that effort is taking you away from the simple truth of who you already are. Think about it. When you say I am, you're expressing the same I am that God expressed when he declared I am that I am. This I am is your true identity. Everything else, your personality, your achievements, your roles, these are merely costumes worn by the eternal I am. Let me share something remarkable about this truth. Once you discover who you really are, all effort ceases. You no longer need to try to become anything because you recognize that you are already everything. This is why Scripture says, be still and know that I am God. My wonderful friends, now we come to what I consider the most transformative aspect of self-discovery. The power of recognizing your true self. This is not merely an intellectual understanding, but a living experience that will revolutionize your entire existence. Let me share something profound that occurred during one of my deep meditations. I suddenly realized that everything I had seeking peace, joy, fulfillment was not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized as my very nature. This recognition, my dear friends, is what I call the ultimate revolution. You see, there's a fundamental difference between knowing something intellectually and recognizing it as your very being. Let me illustrate this with a story that perfectly captures this truth. A lion cub was raised among sheep. It bleated like a sheep, ate grass like a sheep, and thought itself to be a sheep. One day, an adult lion saw this peculiar sight and roared with laughter. The cub, frightened, tried to bleat and run away. The adult lion caught him and dragged him to a clear pool of water. For the first time, the cub saw his own reflection alongside the adult lion's. In that moment of recognition, something profound happened. The cub didn't become a lion. He recognized that he had always been one. This, my beloved friends, is exactly what must happen to you. You are not becoming God. You are recognizing that you have always been the very expression of God himself. This is why Scripture declares, know ye not that ye are gods. Let me share with you the 3 stages of self-recognition. The first stage, the recognition of presence. Begin by recognizing that before you are anything, you are. Before you are male or female, rich or poor, successful or unsuccessful, you simply are. This pure sense of being, this I am, is your first clue to your true identity. Think about it. You never experience yourself as absent. You might experience different states, different circumstances, but you never experience your own absence. This is because you are the eternal presence in which all experiences appear. The second stage, the recognition of awareness. Now go deeper. Recognize that you are not just present, but you are aware. This awareness is not something you have, it is what you are. Everything else appears and disappears in this clearness awareness, but the awareness itself never changes. Let me share a practical exercise I call the awareness watch. Throughout your day, whenever you remember, notice that you are aware. Don't try to analyze or understand awareness. Simply recognize that you are the awareness in which everything appears. The third stage, the recognition of identity. This is the deepest recognition that this awareness, this presence, is not just a quality you possess, but is your very identity. It is the I am that God declared himself to be. You see, my wonderful friends, most spiritual seekers make a fundamental mistake. They try to reach God, try to connect with God, try to become one with God. But I tell you this, you cannot reach what you already are. You cannot connect with what you've never been separated from. You cannot become what you eternally are. Let me share with you what I call the three great illusions that prevent self-recognition. The first illusion, the illusion of separation. You believe you are separate from God, separate from your good, separate from what you desire. This is the fundamental illusion that must be dissolved through self-recognition. The second illusion, the illusion of becoming. You believe you must become something other than what you are. This keeps you perpetually seeking, never finding. The third illusion, the illusion of distance. You believe that what you seek is far away, in some distant future or place. This prevents you from recognizing what is already here, already you. Now let me share with you a profound technique for dissolving these illusions. I call it the recognition practice. Sit quietly and follow these steps. Recognize that you are aware right now. Recognize that this awareness is not something you created or achieved. Recognize that this awareness is the same awareness that God declared as I am. Recognize that you are this I am. You see, my dear friends, the scripture says, be still and know that I am God. Notice it doesn't say become God or reach God, it says no. This knowing is recognition. Let me share something remarkable about this recognition. When you truly recognize who you are, everything changes while nothing changes. The world remains exactly as it is, but your experience of it is completely transformed. Consider this profound truth. The sun doesn't need to do anything to be the sun. It doesn't need to practice being the sun or try to become a better sun. It simply is what it is, and from that natural state, it illuminates everything. In the same way, once you recognize who you really are, you no longer need to try to be anything. Your natural state is complete fulfillment, complete peace, complete joy. These are not states to be achieved, but your very nature to be recognized. Let me begin with something that happened just yesterday. A gentleman approached me after my lecture, deeply troubled. He said, Neville, I understand intellectually that I am God's perfect expression, but my daily experience shows me something entirely different. This, my wonderful friends, is the gap we must bridge, the gap between intellectual understanding and lived experience. You see, living from your true identity is not about adding anything to yourself. It's about removing the veils that hide your true nature. Let me share with you what I call the three veils of forgetfulness. The first veil, the body identity. Most people are completely identified with their body. They think I am this body. But I tell you this, you are not the body, you are the consciousness that animates the body. Your body is in you, you are not in the body. Let me share a profound exercise I call the consciousness shift. Throughout your day, whenever you remember, shift your identity from body to consciousness. Instead of thinking I am walking, recognize I am aware of walking. Instead of I am eating, recognize I am aware of eating. You see, this simple shift begins to loosen the grip of body identification. It's like stepping back from a movie screen and recognizing that you are the awareness in which the movie appears. The second veil, the thought identity. Deeper than body identification is thought identification. People believe they are their thoughts. But ask yourself this, if you are your thoughts, who is aware of the thoughts? Let me share something remarkable about thoughts. They come and go, appear and disappear. But you, the awareness in which thoughts appear, remain constant. You are not the passing clouds of thought, but the unchanging sky of awareness. Here's a practical technique I call the thought witness. Throughout your day, practice watching your thoughts without becoming involved in them. See them as clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. Don't try to change them or control them. Simply witness them. The third veil, the story identity. This is perhaps the subtlest veil, the story you tell about yourself. Your past, your failures, your successes, your relationships, all these form a story. And most people completely identify with this story. But I tell you this, you are not your story. You are the awareness in which all stories appear. This is why Scripture says, "Behold, I make all things new." When you recognize your true identity, you are free to create a new story at any moment. Now let me share with you the 3 stages of living from your true identity. The first stage, recognition throughout the day. Begin by recognizing your true nature as pure awareness throughout your daily activities. Whether you're at work, at home, or in conversation, maintain the recognition that you are not the doer, but the awareness in which doing happens. I call this the constant recognition practice. No matter what you're doing, maintain the background awareness of your true nature. Like a screen that remains unchanged, while different movies play upon it. You remain the unchanging awareness, while life's experiences flow through you. The second stage, living from wholeness. Most people live from a sense of lack, constantly trying to add something to themselves to become complete. But when you recognize your true identity, you live from wholeness. Let me share a profound truth. Everything you seek, peace, joy, love, abundance, these are not things to be achieved, but your very nature to be recognized. When you live from wholeness, you no longer seek anything because you recognize that you are everything. Here's a practical application I call the wholeness recognition. Before you begin any activity, recognize that you are already complete. You are not doing the activity to become something, you're doing it as an expression of what you already are. The third stage, divine expression. This is the highest stage of living from true identity. Here you recognize that every action, every word, every thought is not yours, but God's expression through you. You see, my wonderful friends, when Jesus said, "I and my Father are one," he wasn't making a personal claim. He was declaring a universal truth about your identity. You are not a human being trying to express divinity. You are a divine being expressing through human form. Let me share with you what I call the divine expression practice. Throughout your day, before any action, silently acknowledge God himself is expressing as this action through me. This transforms every mundane activity into a sacred expression. Now, let me address something crucial. Some of you might be thinking, "But Neville, if I am divine being, why do I experience limitations and problems?" This is where we must understand the difference between your true identity and your current state of consciousness. Your true identity is like the sun, eternally shining. But your state of consciousness is like the clouds that can temporarily obscure the sun. The sun hasn't changed or diminished, it's simply hidden from view. This is why Scripture says, "Put off the old man and put on the new man." The old man is your limited state of consciousness. The new man is your true identity as divine being. For you see, while your true identity never changes, your experience of life is determined by the state of consciousness you occupy. Let me share something remarkable that happened during one of my experiments with consciousness. I was in New York, physically present in my small apartment, but I had learned to occupy the state of consciousness of being in Barbados. Within weeks, against all physical evidence and probability, I found myself actually in Barbados. This, my dear friends, is the power of consciousness. You see, states of consciousness are like rooms in a vast mansion. Your true identity, the I am, is the inhabitant who can move from room to room. Let me share with you what I call the 3 levels of conscious transformation. The first level, recognition of states. Most people are completely identified with their current state. If they're in a state of lack, they believe they are lacking. If they're in a state of illness, they believe they are ill. But I tell you this, you are not the state. You are the awareness that can occupy different states. Let me share a practical technique I call the state observer. Throughout your day, practice observing your current state without identifying with it. Instead of saying, I am depressed, recognize I am aware of experiencing a state of depression. This simple shift begins to free you from identification with states. The second level, movement between states. Once you recognize that you are not the state but the occupant of states, you can learn to move between them at will. This is what scripture means when it says, in my Father's house are many mansions. Here's what I call the state shift practice. Choose a state you wish to occupy, let's say the state of abundance. First, recognize that this state already exists. You're not creating it, you're moving into it. Then ask yourself, what would I be thinking, feeling, and experiencing if I were in that state right now? You see, my beloved friends, this is not imagination as people commonly understand it. This is the actual movement of consciousness from one state to another. The outer world must then reorganize itself to match your new state. The third level, permanent transformation. This is the highest level of conscious transformation, where you learn to stabilize in higher states of consciousness. Let me share something profound about this level. Most people visit higher states occasionally, moments of peace, joy, or clarity, but they don't know how to remain there. They're like someone who visits a beautiful mansion but doesn't know they can live there permanently. I call this the divine occupation. It's the art of not just visiting but occupying divine states of consciousness. Here's how you practice it. First, choose a tuned state. Let's say the state of perfect peace. Second, recognize that this state is your natural state as divine being. Third, instead of trying to achieve peace, assume you are peace itself. Fourth, live from this assumption regardless of external circumstances. Now let me share with you what I call the 3 obstacles to transformation that you must understand and overcome. The first obstacle, mental habits. Your old patterns of thinking will try to pull you back to familiar states. This is why scripture says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let me share a technique I call the pattern breaker. Whenever you catch yourself in an old thought pattern, stop and ask who is aware of this pattern. This immediately shifts you back to your true identity as the awareness. The second obstacle, emotional attachments. Even when we want to change, we often have hidden attachments to our current state. This is why Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. Practice what I call the emotional release. Recognize that your emotions are not you. They are experiences passing through you. You can let them go because you are the unchanging awareness in which they appear. The third obstacle, physical evidence. The physical world will continue to show you evidence of your old state while your new state is taking root. This is where most people falter. Remember this profound truth: the physical world is not the cause of your state of consciousness. It is the effect. When you maintain a new state despite contrary evidence, the evidence must change to match your state. Let me share with you the 3 laws of conscious transformation. The first law, the law of consciousness. Whatever state you occupy in consciousness, you must express and experience. The second law, the law of assumption. You become what you assume yourself to be. The third law, the law of expression. Your outer world is the expression of your inner state. My dear friends, tonight we enter into the very heart of conscious transformation, the practice of perfect states. This is where we move beyond mere understanding into the actual art of living from enlightened consciousness. Let me share something remarkable that occurred just last week. A lady came to me in deep distress about her financial situation. Instead of trying to change her circumstances, I showed her how to occupy the state of divine abundance. Within days, opportunities began appearing that she hadn't seen before. You see, it wasn't the world that changed. It was her state of consciousness. Let's explore what I call the 3 perfect states that form the foundation of enlightened living. The first perfect state, divine love. Most people think of love as an emotion or a relationship between separate beings. But I tell you this, divine love is a state of consciousness, your natural state as divine being. Let me share a profound practice I call the love recognition. Throughout your day, recognize that love is not something you feel, but what you are. Instead of trying to feel love, recognize that you are love itself expressing. You see, when Jesus said God is love, he wasn't describing a quality of God. He was describing God's very nature, which is your nature. This recognition transforms every relationship because you're no longer trying to get love or give love. You're being loved. The second perfect state, divine wisdom. Wisdom is not accumulated knowledge, but a state of consciousness that knows through direct recognition. It's what scripture means by be still and know. Here's what I call the wisdom practice. Before making any decision, shift from thinking to direct knowing. Instead of analyzing pros and cons, enter the state of divine wisdom and let the answer reveal itself. You see, my wonderful friends, when you occupy the state of divine wisdom, you have access to all knowledge. This is why Solomon didn't ask for knowledge, he asked for wisdom, and all knowledge was included. The third perfect state, divine power. True power is not the ability to control or dominate, but the state of knowing that all power flows through you as divine expression. Let me share the power recognition practice. Throughout your day, recognize that any power you express, whether thinking, speaking, or acting, is not your personal power, but divine power expressing through you. Now, let me share with you the 3 stages of practicing perfect states. The first stage, recognition. Begin by recognizing that perfect states are not something to achieve, but your natural condition to realize. Like the sun doesn't practice shining, it simply is light. You don't need to practice perfection. You need to recognize your perfect nature. Practice what I call the perfect recognition. Throughout your day, before any activity, recognize, I am the perfect expression of divine being expressing as this activity. The second stage, occupation. This is where you learn to fully occupy perfect states regardless of external conditions. Most people let circumstances determine their state. But I tell you this, you must determine your state regardless of circumstances. Here's a profound technique I call the state occupation. Choose a perfect state, let's say divine peace. Now occupy that state completely, letting go of all resistance to current conditions. You're not trying to change conditions, you're occupying the state that will naturally transform them. The third stage, expression. This is where perfect states become your natural way of being. You no longer need to think about occupying them because you recognize they are your true nature. Let me share what I call the 3 aspects of perfect expression. First aspect, spontaneous expression. Perfect states express spontaneously without effort or planning. Second aspect, complete expression. Perfect states express completely, not partially or gradually. Third aspect, eternal expression. Perfect states express eternally, not temporarily or conditionally. Now let me address something crucial about practicing perfect states. Many people ask, but Neville, how can I maintain perfect states when the world shows me imperfection? Remember this profound truth, the world you see is the outpicturing of your state of consciousness. When you occupy a perfect state, the world must transform to match that state. This is why scripture says, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Let me share with you what I call the 3 keys to maintaining perfect states. The first key, absolute recognition. Recognize that perfection is not a future achievement, but your present nature. The second key, complete acceptance. Accept your perfect nature without trying to improve or change it. The third key, natural expression. Let perfection express naturally without forcing or controlling. Let me begin by sharing a fundamental truth. Everything in your world is you pushed out. Every person, every relationship, every interaction is but a reflection of your own consciousness made manifest. When people suddenly change in your world, they are responding to changes within your own consciousness, whether you are aware of it or not. Now, let me tell you a story from the scripture that beautifully illustrates this principle. In the book of Genesis, we read about Jacob who wrestled with an angel through the night. This is not a historical event, but a psychological drama playing out in consciousness. Jacob wrestled alone, and through this solitary battle he was transformed. His name was changed to Israel, which means he who rules as God. This story is speaking about you, about your journey of transformation. The wrestling match represents the internal struggle we all face when we must stand alone in our consciousness, when those around us seem to change or depart from our lives. Consider this: every person in your life is playing a role in accordance with your assumptions about them. When these assumptions change, when your consciousness shifts, they must by law change their role in your drama. This is not something to fear, but to understand deeply. I remember a lady who came to me in distress. She said, "Neville, everyone in my life has changed. My friends have become strangers. My family seems distant. What am I to do?" I told her what I tell you now. This is not a tragedy, but an opportunity to discover the greatest discovery of your life, the discovery of your own divinity. You see, when people suddenly change, when relationships transform, it is life itself compelling you to stand alone in your imagination. It is pushing you toward the realization that you are the operant power, the only reality. Everything else is a shadow, a reflection of your own wonderful human imagination. Let me make this clearer with another scriptural reference. In the book of John, Jesus says, "I have overcome the world." What world? The world of external dependencies, the world of seeking fulfillment in others. He recognized that he and the Father, the human imagination, are one. Now, some of you might be thinking, "But Neville, I didn't want these changes. I didn't want people to leave or transform." But I tell you this, your surface desires are not always aligned with the deeper movements of your consciousness. Your inner conversations, your habitual assumptions, these are the true sculptors of your reality. When someone suddenly changes in your experience, look first to your own consciousness. What assumptions have you been harboring? What inner conversations have you been having? For it is these that shape your world, not the other way around. I recall a gentleman who attended my lectures in New York. He was distraught because his business partner of 20 years had suddenly turned against him. But upon examination, we discovered that for months he had been carrying an assumption of betrayal, playing out scenarios of distrust in his imagination. The external change was merely the manifestation of his own inner drama. This brings us to a crucial point. The art of surviving alone is not about isolation, but about self-reliance in consciousness. It's about understanding that you are the author of your experience and everyone else is simply playing their part in your script. Consider the biblical injunction, "Put not your trust in princes." This is not telling you to distrust others, but to place your trust in the one and only reality, your own wonderful human imagination. For when you truly grasp this, you will never be alone, for you cannot be separated from your own consciousness. Now, let me share with you the practical application of this knowledge. When you notice people changing around you, instead of reacting with fear or resistance, do this: stand firmly in the awareness that you are the operant power. Your consciousness is the only reality. Begin to have new inner conversations. Instead of lamenting the changes, say to yourself, "I am the creator of my reality. These changes are moving me toward my greater good." For remember, the whole vast world is yourself pushed out. Every person is yourself in another costume. I want you to understand something profound. The sudden changes in others are often a signal that you are ready for a greater revelation of your own power. Just as a butterfly must struggle alone to emerge from its chrysalis, you too must sometimes face the apparent solitude that precedes transformation. Let me tell you another story that illustrates this principle. There was a woman who attended my lectures in Los Angeles. She had built her entire life around her social circle, her relationships. When these began to change and dissolve, she fell into despair. But through understanding this law, she discovered something remarkable: her own divine nature. She began to practice what I'm sharing with you tonight. Instead of seeking validation or support from others, she turned within. She began to live from the assumption that she was complete, whole, and divinely supported. And do you know what happened? New relationships emerged, better ones aligned with her new self-concept. This is the law, as within, so without. The changes you see in others are reflecting changes in your own consciousness. Therefore, instead of trying to hold on to people or prevent change, focus on standing firmly in your own wonderful human imagination. Remember the words from Scripture, "Be still and know that I am God." This stillness is not physical stillness, but a quiet confidence in your own consciousness as the creative power in your world. When you know this, truly know it, you cannot be disturbed by external changes. Now let me address something that many of you might be wondering. What about love? What about connection? I tell you this, true love, true connection comes from the recognition that everyone in your world is you pushed out. When you love yourself, when you trust your own consciousness, you will naturally attract and maintain relationships that reflect this self-love. But here's the crucial point. These relationships will be different. They will no longer be based on dependency or fear, but on the recognition of your own completeness. People may still change, but these changes will no longer threaten your peace of mind. Consider this. In the Bible, Jesus often withdrew to be alone. This was not about physical solitude, but about returning to the consciousness of being the operant power. When you can do this, when you can stand alone in your imagination, you have mastered the art of living. Let me give you a practical exercise. Tonight, when you go to sleep, instead of reviewing the changes and apparent losses in your life, do this. Live from the assumption that you are complete, whole, and divinely supported. Feel the truth of it. Fall asleep in this consciousness. For remember, your consciousness is the only reality. The people in your world are playing roles based on your assumptions. When these assumptions change, their roles must change. This is law. I want to share with you another profound truth. The ability to stand alone in your imagination is the greatest power you possess. It is the meaning behind the Scripture, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." When you grasp this, when you live from this understanding, external changes lose their power to disturb you. Think about this. Everything you see in the world, every person, every relationship, is a shadow cast by your consciousness. When the light of consciousness shifts, the shadows must move. This is not something to fear, but to embrace. Now, some of you might be thinking, "But Neville, what if I'm not ready to be alone?" I tell you this, you are never truly alone. You are one with your own wonderful human imagination. And this is the only reality that matters. The changes you see in others are actually helping you discover this truth. They are pushing you toward the recognition of your own divinity. For remember, the whole vast world is yourself pushed out. Let me share one more story that illustrates this principle. A man came to me devastated because his entire social circle had suddenly turned against him. But through applying this law, through standing alone in his imagination, he discovered something remarkable. He found that as his consciousness shifted, as he began to live from the assumption of being divinely supported, new relationships naturally emerged that reflected this new state. This is the law. Your outer world must conform to your inner assumptions. When people suddenly change, when relationships transform, it is life itself compelling you to examine and adjust your consciousness. Remember the words of Scripture, "I and my Father are one." The Father is your own wonderful human imagination. When you know this, when you live from this understanding, you cannot be shaken by external changes. So tonight, I urge you to embrace these changes. See them as the natural result of your own expanding consciousness. Stand alone in your imagination, knowing that it is the only reality that matters. For when you can do this, when you can truly stand alone in your consciousness, you will discover that you are never truly alone. You are one with the creative power of the universe, your own wonderful human imagination. And from this understanding, this recognition of your own divine nature, you will create relationships and experiences that reflect your highest assumptions about yourself and life. Remember, the whole vast world is yourself pushed out. Every person is yourself in another costume. When you grasp this, when you live from this truth, you will have mastered the art of living. So let people change. Let relationships transform. Stand firmly in your own consciousness, knowing that you are the operant power, the only reality that matters. For in this understanding lies true freedom, true peace, and true mastery of life. And so I tell you this profound truth again. When you truly grasp that you are the operant power, that your consciousness is God in action, these sudden changes in people become not just understandable, but necessary for your spiritual evolution. Consider what we read in Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. These seasons of change, these moments when people suddenly transform or depart from your life, are divine appointments in consciousness. They are not happening to you. They are happening from you. I recall a striking incident from my own experience in Barbados. A dear friend who had been constant in my life for many years suddenly became a stranger. At first, like many of you might feel, I was bewildered. But then I realized this change was reflecting a shift in my own consciousness. I was being prepared for a greater understanding of the law. You see, when people suddenly change, it is often a signal that you are ready to move into a new state of consciousness. Just as a snake must shed its old skin to grow, you must sometimes let go of old relationships and patterns to embody your new state. Let me share with you another principle. Your inner conversations create your tomorrow. When people suddenly change, examine your inner conversations about them. What have you been telling yourself? For remember, the whole vast world is yourself pushed out. I remember a young woman who came to me in New York. She was distraught because everyone in her life seemed to be turning away from her simultaneously. But when we examined her inner conversations, we discovered that for months she had been repeating to herself, "No one understands me. I must do everything alone." Do you see? Her outer world was simply conforming to her inner conversations. This is law, not chance. Now some of you might ask, "But Neville, how do I maintain my stability when everyone around me is changing?" The answer lies in understanding that stability comes not from external circumstances, but from your consciousness of being the operant power. Consider the words of Paul, "I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." This is not resignation, but the recognition that your consciousness is the only reality. When you stand firm in this understanding, external changes lose their power to disturb you. Let me give you a practical technique for mastering this state of consciousness. Tonight, as you lay in your bed, instead of reviewing the day's events or worrying about changing relationships, do this. Feel the reality of being the consciousness in which all things exist. Feel the truth that you are the awareness in which all changes take place. For remember, consciousness is the only reality. Everything else, every person, every relationship, every circumstance is an effect, not a cause. When you live from this understanding, you become immune to the fear of sudden changes. I want to share with you a profound truth that few understand. The people who suddenly change or leave your life are actually helping you discover your own completeness. They are pushing you toward the recognition that you are sufficient unto yourself because you are one with your own wonderful human imagination. Think about this in the story of the prodigal son. The young man had to lose everything, his relationships, his wealth, his status, before he could discover his true inheritance. This story is about you, about your journey to self-discovery through apparent loss and change. Now, let me address something that many of you might be struggling with, the fear of being alone. This fear comes from not understanding that you can never be alone because you are one with the creative power of the universe, your own wonderful human imagination. I remember a man who attended my lectures in San Francisco. He had built his entire identity around his social circle and professional relationships. When these began to crumble, he felt as though his world was ending. But through applying this law, through standing alone in his imagination, he discovered something remarkable, his own divine nature. You see, when people suddenly change, they are actually helping you fulfill a deeper pattern in consciousness. They are playing their part in your spiritual awakening, whether they know it or not. Consider the biblical story of Joseph. His brothers suddenly turned against him, sold him into slavery. But this apparent betrayal was actually the means by which he discovered his true power and fulfilled his divine destiny. Your story is no different. When people change, when relationships transform, it is life itself compelling you to stand in your own divinity. It is pushing you toward the recognition that you are the author of your experience, not a victim of circumstances. Remember these words, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. This transformation often requires the dissolution of old patterns, old relationships, old ways of being. When people suddenly change, they are reflecting this inner transformation. Let me give you another practical application of this law. Instead of resisting these changes, instead of trying to hold on to people who are clearly moving in a different direction, do this. Stand firmly in the consciousness of being the operant power. Know that you are the awareness in which all things exist. For remember, the whole vast world is yourself pushed out. Every person who suddenly changes is reflecting a change in your own consciousness, whether you are aware of it or not. I want you to grasp something profound. These sudden changes in relationships are actually opportunities for the greatest discovery of your life, the discovery of your own divine nature. When you understand this, when you live from this truth, you become invincible to external changes. Consider the words of Scripture, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. This is not about blind faith in an external God, but about absolute confidence in your own wonderful human imagination, regardless of external circumstances. Remember, you are not a victim of these changes. You are the creator of your reality, and everyone in your world is playing their part in your divine drama. When you grasp this, when you live from this understanding, you become master of your destiny.